here, they would have been borne out by this. But certainly the BRICS, to go back to our little cliche, Brazil, India, China, Russia, these are markets that have been in varying degrees complicated, but also very, very good markets for us. And I think from a trade perspective, every single one of those has an impact to everybody's business today. New Europe, and here we're in, for ISI, probably the second most active office in what we call New Europe at ISI here in Bulgaria. This is where our roots are, and so we have a very, very strong attachment from, if nothing else, a sentimental perspective, but from a business perspective, when we look around Central and Eastern Europe, we see nothing but opportunity. And then the MENA and Africa region, I think perhaps comes under the rubric of most challenging markets, and in different ways in different areas. Of course, the African market is where it reminds me of the first days when we came to Poland and opened our offices. It just was brand new, untapped, nobody really doing any kind of activity of merit, but also a lot of challenges in terms of just being able to collect even the most basic of information. And on the MENA side, frankly, you still have a lot of government intervention and involvement in what is free and clear flow of information. So I put that up on the challenge slide. Of course, the boom and bust nature of the markets, of the financial markets, is one of the dangers in this business, and perhaps it is one of the things that has tended to keep other information vendors and companies and cause them to be a little bit gun-shy about getting into some of the markets we've been interested in. And the point of this slide here is, unfortunately it's a little bit dated, because I actually did have the other slide where I updated this until October, but the market, since this is market index oriented, the market effect, while not as strong in, say, Shanghai and India and China, was quite marked in some of the smaller Asian countries. But I don't think the point I wanted to make with this is the boom from 1987 to 1997, which was the genesis or the time of the Asian crisis, right? Before 1997, we talked of Asian tigers all the time. If you go back and look at old advertisements in The Economist magazine, everything that had anything to do with Southeast Asia had a tiger on it. And then 1997 happened, and the market just fell out. In fact, the market crash in 1997 in Asia was more severe for Asia than the current crash has been. The point on this slide was that we still, from a growth perspective, back in April, had not reached the levels of the Asian crash growth levels, and even though today this slide is a little bit more skewed, it is an indicative market barometer, I think, of just how far one can proceed to go in the markets there in Asia. Now, Asian economies' dependence on the U.S. market has tended to decrease. And you'll notice I'm starting to develop a bit of a theme here, and I think it has to do with where we are most interested in seeing our business grow in the next 2 years or so. But I think this is another interesting trend that plays into our market focus. And principally, you can see that the local or the vendor. Sorry, not the vendor. The market of last resort and first resort traditionally was the United States. But you can see in the Asian region that there is, without question, a domestic consumption pattern in China that is changing that equation. And another thing with China that our analysts at CIC Data came up for me was this rather interesting graph, which is meant to show a narrowing gap between the difference between goods that are merely assembled and goods that are fully produced in China. So if in the last year or so, that line has crossed where in China it's not so much importing goods and assembling material. They're creating finished goods in higher numbers than goods that are merely assembled from foreign inputs. Which means that the internal demand for all the components that goes into it has basically skyrocketed. If you read The Economist this morning, you would see that despite the market turmoil and the mass layoffs that are happening around the world, in China, companies in industries like ours are still finding it impossible to maintain their ranks. It turns out that the jobs that have been lost have been in toy makers and garment manufacturers that tend to be directly affected by a consumer downturn. But information-heavy industries like ours, where talented people are in shorter supply, they're continuing to grow. Not to leave the local markets out, I mentioned earlier that we do some tracking of deal and acquisition activity in the region, and I asked our analysts to give a little bit of an update on that. Obviously, 2008 numbers are year-to-date and incomplete, and it does look like in terms of volume there will be slightly less activity, but the values of the businesses that are being bought and sold in the region are increasing. You can see rather markedly. Now, in terms of data types of what sort of things come into the customer place, the customer mindset when they're using ISI, I think we obviously categorize data in a lot of different ways. But from an information user perspective, the vast majority of what drives usage of anybody trying to keep abreast of the markets we cover tends to be news oriented. And then finally, I apologize that this is a somewhat hard to read slide. The industry analysis and research is the second bar, and then you can see quite clearly everything tails off. So this poses a bit of a problem for an information company like mine, because the ubiquity of news is quite frankly a competitor. And I used to be asked a lot who your biggest competitor is, and once upon a time my answer was ignorance, and the competitor was ignorance of the value of electronic information. Well, nobody is ignorant of the value of electronic information anymore, because you have actually some great free tools for this sort of thing.